Israelis have begun to bury the dead, including this man who was killed during the fighting at the Be'eri kibbutz in southern Israel. Secretary of State Antony Blinken spent the day in Israel meeting with top officials, including Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and Israelis grieving the loss of their loved ones. Blinken said he arrived in the country not just as a U.S. diplomat, but also as a Jew, father, and husband. In this moment where he said the suffering is hard to fathom.
The message that I bring to Israel is this. You may be strong enough on your own to defend yourself, but as long as America exists, you will never ever have to. We will always be there by your side.
Blinken said he plans to meet with leaders in the region to try to prevent spreading of violence that has claimed at least 2,800 lives on both sides, and to try to win the release of some 150 hostages Hamas is still holding.
From here, I'll go on to Jordan, where I'll meet with His Majesty King Abdullah and with Palestinian Authority President Abbas. And then over the coming days, we'll visit with leaders in Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Qatar.
As Israel continued to pound Gaza City with airstrikes, Blinken said he and Israeli leaders discussed ways to address the humanitarian needs of Gaza residents. Blinken said he also planned to bring up the possibilities for safe passage of civilians out of Gaza during meetings with regional leaders in the coming days. Israel is gathering massive forces, tanks, and other heavy armor around the occupied Palestinian territory as it continues its retaliatory campaign against what Prime Minister Netanyahu called the sheer evil of terror attacks by Hamas. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
Joining us now is VOA's Jessica Stone. She's live at the White House for us. Jessica, Washington has been trying to facilitate Israel and Saudi Arabia's normalization of relations. Have there been any developments regarding this?
Well, things are not looking good, according to top political analysts. They think at this point that deal may very much be endangered. And what's more, Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, has said as much. He said that this could have been an effort by Iran to scuttle those negotiations. You know, Saudi Arabia has been a key backer of the Palestinian cause, and critics have said that the ongoing conversations regarding normalizations haven't really addressed giving statehood to the Palestinians. So that's been an ongoing thing that the Saudis wanted to have addressed. In a statement, in fact, after these recent attacks, this is what the Saudi Arabian government said. They said that they had called for an immediate end to the, quote, escalation, and they said it had repeatedly warned of possible violence due to the long-standing occupation of the Palestinian territories. Israel and Saudi Arabia do share a common enemy in Iran, and that is part of what had been drawing them closer together and what the U.S. was using to leverage the situation. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has maintained that Iran is complicit, if not directly responsible, for planning this attack because of its long-standing funding for Hamas.
Back here at home, today is a significant day, of course, because it's an alert for, quote unquote, a day of rage, a day of anger. And there are about 7.6 million Jews living in the United States, about 3.5 million Muslims. We do know that U.S. law enforcement are on high alert. But what are these communities doing to protect their people in places of worship?
Well, they're definitely increasing security around temples. You know, this evening begins Shabbat for the Jewish people in the United States. And so there is an ongoing conversation by some of the top community organizations within the Jewish faith to augment security, to ask local law enforcement to participate in that security. And as you know, the NYPD has asked all of its officers to forego vacations, to be in uniform today for religious services, as well for rallies that are planned today on Friday in New York City. And also, one of the largest Muslim groups in the U.S. is also cautioning students around the country to be very careful, possibly because they could be targeted because of what's going on in in Gaza. This attack, of course, was the most deadly day for Jews since the Holocaust. So many American Jews are really reeling, grieving. They have a lot of connections to Israel. And according to a 2021 FBI report, the incidents of hate crimes for religious Jewish people have gone up by half, even though they only make up, as you said, less than 3% of the U.S. population. In terms of the Muslim population in the United States, again, more uniformed police are expected at that Friday rally in favor of Gaza there in New York City. Susan?
Yeah, Jessica, what a difference a week makes. We were just talking last Friday, and here we are this Friday with so much devastating news. Please stay with me. We have more news to cover, and I'd love to get your insight on our next story as well. Republican Representative Steve Scalise dropped his bid to become Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives on late Thursday after failing to secure enough votes. VOA's congressional correspondent Katherine Gibson has more on how Congress is unable to act on Ukraine and Israel until a new leader is chosen.
Republican Representative Steve Scalise announced late Thursday he was dropping his bid to become Speaker of the House.
Our conference still has to come together and is not there. There are still some people that have their own agendas.
Despite winning a narrow majority of Republican votes Wednesday to become the Speaker nominee, Scalise could not secure a 217-vote majority, with all Democrats expected to vote against him.
You told a lot of people he's going to be at 150. He wasn't there.
Former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who was removed from power last week, lost only 8 Republican votes and has also not ruled himself out of being re-elected Speaker. Many Republican critics said Scalise is no different from McCarthy and would not negotiate the spending cuts they want.
This is a competition, and it's going to be even more difficult.
The other Republican candidate for Speaker, conservative Jim Jordan, had called for an end to the debate and threw his support to Scalise.
I hope we can unite around a speaker and keep doing the work of the American people and helping our dearest and closest friend, the state of Israel.
All 212 Democrats are expected to vote for their leader, Hakeem Jeffries, who called for an end to the paralysis in the House.
Israel needs its closest friend and ally in the world, the United States of America, to stand with Israel in this urgent time of need. The inability of House Republicans to get their act together, even when they themselves, by their own rules, have elected a Speaker nominee, speaks to the broader chaos and dysfunction and extremism.
One analyst described how a power-sharing agreement between Democrats and Republicans could work if the House remains deadlocked.
Minority Leader Jeffries kind of floated this idea very, very recently, saying, hey, if you guys are enough of you moderates, if you guys want to get back to the processing the business, particularly with the calamities that are happening around the world, we need to do the people's business, both here and abroad. And so if there are enough responsible moderates out there in the Republican Party, I can work with someone.
Republicans are also exploring the possibility of keeping the temporary Speaker, Republican Representative Patrick McHenry, in a more permanent role through November, when a temporary government funding bill is set to expire. Katherine Gibson, VOA News.
VOA's Jessica Stone is still with us. Jessica, Kevin McCarthy has opened himself to the position after he had to step down. And last night in an interview on Fox, he said that he'll support whoever the GOP conference agrees on. Do you think he can muster up the required numbers at this point?
You know, the numbers have not been there for him. Certainly took him 15 rounds to get the support of his conference last time. And then he is perceived by his critics to have broken his promise to them, not only crossing party lines to work with Democrats, but supporting a short-term funding bill. You heard in the piece there by Katherine Gibson that critics of Scalise are also critics of McCarthy. So if Scalise couldn't get the votes, it would seem to be pretty reasonable to expect that McCarthy can't get the votes. Add in the Trump factor, which is that Trump is backing Jim Jordan and has not ever backed McCarthy, and you just have to conclude that there is very little support and very unclear where the road is ahead for the Republican leadership in the House.
And how is this speaker race impacting Congress, given there are so many important issues at hand before them?
Well, it's really resulted in a lot of paralysis, and there's not just the speaker chaos. There's also a couple of criminal indictments against a sitting senator, the former head of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Robert Menendez of New Jersey, accused now of being a foreign agent on behalf of Egypt. Given that Egypt is close by in this Middle East events, it is not reflecting well on Congress that these accusations have been made against a powerful member of the Senate. And then you take George Santos, who's a new Republican in the House, has faced already a number of criminal charges. Now he's charged with committing credit card fraud on behalf of his donors, meaning that he was using their credit cards to rack up campaign expenses. So there's a lot of chaos in the House, and really until they have a House Speaker, they cannot legislate for Israel, they cannot legislate for extra funding for Ukraine, and they cannot even pass short-term funding to keep the U.S. government open. Obviously, if it's not open, it's not in a position to help anyone, including the citizens of the United States. This is a very unique time in American history, in American political history. And the speaker's race is at the heart of it. But they can't afford to lose George Santos's vote in this matter because he's also still a member of that conference.
Yeah, and the GOP conference is meeting as we speak right now. Let's see if anything productive comes out of it. Jessica Stone from the White House, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure to be with you.